It is the Worth Knowing live stream on my Substack, Worth Knowing, with Matt Robison. I'm the Matt Robison, and also on the Cliff's Edge channel on YouTube, both in portrait and landscape, in case you're the kind of person who wants to watch something and then turn your head sideways and watch it again. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, LinkedIn. And coming up in just a few minutes, we have one of the top business experts in America, an old friend of mine, Chris Hill, the former host of Motley Fool Money with an umlaut over the O, Motley Fool Money. For many years, it was the #1 business and stock investing radio program in America. And now he's the host of Money Unplugged. And we're going to talk about this extremely strange economy we're in. Are we in an AI bubble? Why are people so unhappy? I think we know that. Are we about to see even more price spikes under the weight of Donald Trump's tariffs? What about the mega media merger, the bizarre three-way going on between Netflix and Paramount and Warner, which I guess is like Batman and Indiana Jones, and there's like a menage a trois going on. It's very weird. Are we the last people in America who are ever going to get to go to a movie theater? Are electricity prices going to skyrocket? We're going to hit everything in the economy and business. And if you're joining in the chats, please feel free to start teeing up your questions for Chris Hill. Everything's on the table. He's a really interesting guy, and we're going to have a lot of fun. But first, and speaking of fun, we are right in the middle of the holiday season, and I don't know if you're having fun right now or not. A lot of people find the holiday season to be kind of depressing. Personally, I'm a Grinch who hates Christmas music and hates Hanukkah music even more and doesn't like snow or cold. I think Santa Claus is creepy. And so it all kind of feels like a drag to me right now. But there's no doubt that for most of us, even if we're filled with the holiday spirit, the news can really be a bummer. From the horrible shootings in Australia and at Brown University, and in California, the killing of director Rob Reiner and his wife, to the staggering cost of living that we're all going through and the callous indifference of Republican senators, to the millions who are not going to be able to afford health insurance anymore, to RFK Jr.'s all-out attack on vaccines for children, just to the endless list of outrages perpetrated by our president. It's all a lot. So I want to take just a few minutes before Chris joins us to talk about some good things that are going on. And this isn't rose-colored glasses. This isn't to pretend that bad news doesn't exist. It's to remind ourselves that there's some light at the end of the tunnel and some reason to feel hope and optimism. Now, in keeping with my own faith tradition, I'm going to offer what I'm calling 8 points of light. And yes, those of you who subscribe to my Substack, Worth Knowing, know that just yesterday I republished my earlier published article in Newsweek entitled American Jews, We Messed Up Hanukkah, Let's Fix It. So you might be thinking this is an ironic offering from me, but let me just assure you that first of all, I think my article makes a solid argument. So I hope you'll check it out. Let me know what you think. Second of all, I still think the theme, which is shared across all sorts of faith traditions, of bringing a little light to a very dark time is entirely appropriate. So here we go with 8 points of light, 8 good news stories, genuine good news stories that are very real and very encouraging. And let me also just say hello to everyone in the chats right now. Please chime in and please feel free to offer your own points of light. I sound like George H.W. Bush here. Things that are bringing you up, because again, I think it's a remarkably down time, and it's a tough time for a lot of people. And reading the news doesn't help. But here's one thing that grabbed my attention just yesterday: a redistricting, gerrymandering simmer down. Indiana Republicans, who last week overwhelmingly rejected Donald Trump's big gerrymandering push, it seems to have kicked off maybe a détente, maybe a slight pause in the gerrymandering power grab wars. Now, look, to be clear and upfront about this before I get into the details, I want to clarify that when the media talks about gerrymandering wars, it suggests that it's a back and forth, two equal parties firing at each other. Not at all. Not at all. I've written about this relatively recently. This is almost entirely a Republican-led maneuver, a power grab, a pretty dirty political play. But that said, Democrats from a defensive position have had to engage, as they have in California, and that has led to a back and forth. It's really a race to the bottom that serves no one. And it seems like the result in Indiana has given some cover for Democratic-leaning states to stand down, maybe simmer down, maybe hit pause. Illinois Democrats said they would gerrymander if they would only gerrymander if the Indiana Republicans bowed to Trump's demand. It's unclear if they're going to change their minds. But in Maryland, the Democratic leader got on the phone call with the Indiana Senate Republican leader, and they said, "Hey, thank you. Let's hit pause here." It seems like there's some pause coming in Virginia, where there was another move afoot to try to even the score. And so, yes, there could still be some dark clouds on the horizon here. If the U.S. Supreme Court further guts the Voting Rights Act, it's going to kick off a new round of redistricting, and it's going to be another round of power grabs from Republicans, right, who are going to see an opportunity to crack into Democratic held seats because they are majority minority seats, which are overwhelmingly held by Democrats. But for now, it does seem like there's a little bit of a pause, a little bit of a slow in the race to the bottom, and that is good news. Here's a second piece of good news, and it comes with a big grain of salt, but it's nonetheless good news. Ukraine. Now, let me give the grain of salt first. Negotiators who were working on a peace deal for Ukraine over the weekend said they were 90% there. Well, I mean, forgive me if I have some skepticism about claims from anyone in the Trump administration saying, yeah, we're almost there on a deal for Ukraine. We've been hornswoggled before. Actually, I have not been hornswoggled. I never believed any of this. But there are some real signs of forward progress. The U.S. is on board with Article 5 that's NATO-like security guarantees for Ukraine. That's a big deal. It is an explicit security pledge that Vladimir Zelensky has been looking for. And in exchange, he has signaled willingness to give ground on some key issues that Russia has demanded. And again, not trying to project any kind of a both sidesism to this here. Russia is the despicable aggressor in a horrible war that's killed 1 million people. But in order to achieve a peace, there are going to have to be some concessions. There's going to have to be some kind of face saving for Putin here. And so Zelensky has gotten a key concession from the US that is strongly backed in Europe. And the language that's coming out of European interlocutors is remarkably positive. I'm going to quote German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who told reporters over the weekend that legal and material security guarantees that the U.S. has put on the table here in Berlin are remarkable. One of Vladimir Zelensky's top lieutenants said that the Ukrainian-U.S. negotiations have been constructive, productive, with real progress achieved. A lot more to come, but I think that's unquestionably a positive sign. Here's number 3, and this is a little bit of a zag. Number 3 is the pushback that we've seen to Donald Trump's unhinged rant on Truth Social about Rob Reiner. So obviously the murder of Rob Reiner and his wife was incredibly sad, incredibly heartbreaking. I think for those of us who grew up on those movies, it's been tough to take. But what's been tougher to take is what Trump said. He wrote, I'll just go ahead and read it. I don't really need to splash it up on the screen. Very sad thing happened last night in Hollywood. So far, so good. Rob Reiner, a tortured and struggling, but once very talented movie director and comedy stars, passed away, reportedly due to the anger he caused others through his massive, unyielding, and incurable affliction with a mind-crippling disease known as Trump derangement syndrome. He was known to have driven people crazy by his raging, good grammar there, Don, his raging obsession of, Donald J. Trump. I know what should outrage me about this isn't the grammar, but the grammar, it does get me. His raging obsession of President Donald J. Trump with his obvious paranoia reaching new heights as the Trump administration surpassed all goals and expectations of greatness. Wow, this read better in the original German. The point is, Thomas Massie, unhinged lunatics of the GOP, have come out of the woodwork to say, this is a little crazy even for us. Thomas Massie said, regardless of how you felt about Rob Reiner, this is inappropriate and disrespectful discourse about a man who was just brutally murdered. I guess my elected GOP colleagues, the VP and the White House staff, will just ignore it because they're afraid. I challenge anyone to defend it. That's pretty strong stuff there, Thomas. Good. Hold on. Marjorie Taylor Greene called the murders a family tragedy, not about politics or political enemies, writing the situation should be met with empathy. Mike Lawler, Republican of New York, this statement is wrong. It's a horrible tragedy that should engender sympathy and compassion from everyone. Former Trump lawyer Jenna Ellis, a man and his wife were murdered last night. This is not the appropriate response. This is a horrible example from Trump. So look, for those of you following along at home, just words, right? A lot of thoughts and prayers in that. But on the other hand, this connects to something I'm going to touch on later, which is there is momentum. There is momentum building to stand up to Donald Trump, to have some pushback to Donald Trump. And that is a positive thing. I got to pick up the pace here. Boy, I'm only halfway through the list and Chris is on the way. All right. Here's number 4. Jared Kushner drops a plan to build a Trump hotel in Serbia. This is from the Wall Street Journal. He pulled out of a planned Trump-branded development in Belgrade that he's been working on for more than 2 years after the project not only sparked protests, but also the indictment of a senior Serbian politician. A special prosecutor indicted a cabinet minister and 3 other officials over the project. Turns out if you run a worldwide corrupt mafia organization, it might even get you tripped up in Serbia. And Jared Kushner goes down hard. So that's good news. Number 5. I'll just read this one out. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko freed 123 prisoners on Saturday, including Nobel Peace Prize winner Alice Bialetsky. I'm going to get these names pronounced correctly. Leading opposition figure Maria Kalesnikava, in a deal brokered by an envoy for U.S. President Donald Trump. Look, longtime viewers know my feelings about Donald Trump, but he has gotten occasionally a few things right, and his representatives have done a good job in negotiating to free U.S. prisoners. They just have, and this is not just U.S. prisoners. This is good news. Number 6, lame duck Trump. Now, I wrote about this. I've been writing about this consistently. I wrote about this last week, and I'm going to quote here from Elliot Morris. The 2025 elections already gave us a preview of what affordability midterm might look like. In the races for governor in New Jersey and Virginia, roughly half of voters said the economy was the most important issue facing the country. Those voters backed Democratic candidates by 30 points, a 90-point swing relative to the 2024 election. What you find is that from his polling, voters who say inflation or the economy is their top issue favor Democrats over Republicans by a 12-point margin. 12 points. And we've seen overall a 13.3% pro-Democratic Party swing in special elections this cycle. And we saw that play out last Tuesday when a Democrat flipped a state Senate district that Trump had previously won by 12 points. Another Democrat won the mayorship of Miami for the first time since 1997. We overperformed by 13 points in a losing, but nevertheless overperformed by 13 points in a special congressional race the week before. We flipped every county in New Jersey in the gubernatorial election that is over 60% plus Latino. And of course, there's the aforementioned refusal by Indiana Republicans to bow to Trump's gerrymandering demands. The man is becoming a lame duck. The worm is turning. All right, we're rounding the home stretch, and I see that Chris is backstage, so I'm going to bring this home. I'm going to borrow one from Derek Thompson here. GLP-1 drugs, number 7, are probably less effective than they'll ever be. Now, that's good news. What he's saying is these things are already remarkably effective, and they're only going to get better in the next few years. The findings so far, they don't just help patients with type 2 diabetes. They don't just promote weight loss. We all know that one. They seem to affect every biological system. They seem to protect against heart disease, even in patients who don't lose weight. Wide anti-aging effects on even a minimal dosage. Advantages in Alzheimer's, inflammation, I mean, just the aging part really appeals to me as my hair gets increasingly white. Remarkable that I told my kids that they may be the last generation to ever see obese people in America. That's where we've gotten to. Actually, I may be part of the last generation that ever gets old. How's that? All right. Let's get to number 8, and this is a quick one because I'm about to bring Chris on. The number 8 is really just thank you to all of you. I say this virtually every week, and if I don't say it in a given week, it's because I'm being remiss. I really appreciate all of you in the audience, in the chats. The Worth Knowing Substack is growing steadily. I've become a bestseller, and this live stream continues to go strong. So does our usual friend Cliff Schecter's. And it's really just an enjoyable experience week after week for us to be all together and to welcome in exciting guests, interesting people with interesting opinions and real expertise, not just ranting bullshit artists, but actual experts like Chris Hill of Money Unplugged. I had memorized your former tagline for Motley Fool Money, the #1 stock investing radio program in America. Do you have a tagline, Chris?
I think the tagline for Money Unplugged is everyone has a relationship with money. And that's what my podcast is about. It's about talking to people about their lifelong relationship with money. So it's famous authors, media personalities, had a stand-up comedian on a couple of months ago, and just talking to them about what was money like growing up? What do you remember about it? What was the first job you had when you were a kid? And we talk about how it changes as you get older and maybe start a family, get married, that sort of thing. And every episode ends with a speed round of questions, a little lighter, things like, "What was the last thing you splurged on?" What was the last thing you splurged on, Matt? And while
So
you think
lame.
about that,
So lame.
let me just give you a little, and anyone who's
It's gonna make me
watching.
feel worse if you give me examples.
No,
Go
here's the
ahead.
thing. Here's the thing. I told this to someone recently that I think it's natural for people. You hear the word splurge, and you automatically associate a large amount of money. Like you splurge on a new car, you splurge on a new home, that sort of thing, a really fancy watch or piece of jewelry. And increasingly, I find that I have a second definition for splurge that I really sort of lean into, and it's leaning into the last 4 letters of the word, the urge part. Because to
Mm.
me, yes, I think the word has 2 meanings. Yes, it can mean spending a lot of money on something, but I think it can also mean spending money that you had not planned to spend. And that doesn't have to be a lot of money. I splurged the other day on a breakfast sandwich. Like, I was walking around town, I wanted some coffee, I thought, "I'm just gonna get some coffee," and I went into this place, and everything just looked and smelled so good, I said, "I think I need a breakfast sandwich now." So, what was the last thing you splurged on?
I'm an extraordinarily boring person, as you've known for years. We met on a campaign more than 20 years ago, back before you went legit. But and longtime viewers know I'm a very boring person, and so I don't give into a lot of urges. The last urge I gave into was to buy a new laptop because mine is getting really long in the tooth. And it turns out, like everything else in the world, everything is a pain in the ass. And so I'm struggling to set it up. So it's sitting here right next to me. I'm pointing at it, and I haven't really made use of it yet because I don't have the time. But my relationship to money, and I think this is going to connect to the broader conversation we wanted to have about the economy today, is I I realize that I don't splurge. I don't really have fancy tastes. I mean, I do like getting things for my family. I just got my wife a heated fleece. It's okay. She doesn't listen to this shit. No, she does. She does, but she knows what I'm getting her. I just got her one of those heated, like it's a battery pack heated fleece because she's cold a lot. I like getting things like that, but most of all, what matters to me about money is that I don't want to feel anxiety about it. I felt a lot of anxiety about money growing up because we didn't have it. And it was stressful for me. And what I most want out of my work is, I mean, besides the personal satisfaction, is the feeling of not feeling anxiety, feeling like the kids, gosh, I don't have capacity. We just left my daughter's basketball game. I don't have time to go home and cook. We're going to Chipotle, kids. Feeling like I can do that and not worry about it. And
Yeah,
so I wanted to ask you about kind of the weird economy people are feeling,
yeah.
even though the top line numbers in the economy are not that bad from an economist standpoint. What the hell do economists know about economics? People feel almost unprecedented levels of dejection and a kind of a downbeat feeling about the Michigan Consumer Survey is at its second lowest measured level ever. People are really downbeat and really anxious. Why? Let's take a break. We'll be right back.
I think there are a number of reasons for that because the economy is a very complex beast. Obviously, a lot of factors go into it. Something you and I have talked about in the past, Matt, is you mentioned the survey, and I'm someone who, when I look at the world of investing, when I look at the U.S. economy, I'm one of those people. I'm not a data geek. I don't do like really deep dives on data, but I am someone who welcomes data. As far as I'm concerned, the more data, the better. And something you and I have talked about before is how my preference, and it's nothing against the Michigan survey, but my preference around things like consumer confidence and CEO confidence. I'm interested in those numbers, but I'm more interested and I give more weight to the actual numbers around spending. So when Visa and Mastercard do their monthly reports on like what is happening with consumer spending. And so, yes, consumer confidence is down. You look at the consumer spending heading into the holiday season, it's down from previous years. This was telegraphed earlier in the fall because the major retailers, Walmart, Target, Costco, Amazon, obviously, when they do their seasonal hiring, those numbers were either flat compared to last year and in some cases lower than last year. So I think you look at that, you look at the jobs data that just came out, and you back it up 6 months. I mean, basically, the US economy hasn't really added jobs over the last 6 months. Layoffs, the number I believe I saw was 710,000 in the last 12 months. So almost a million people being laid off, not really adding new jobs over the last 6 months. And so I think that's where it comes from because the economy is both national and highly personal. It's one of those things where even if you have a job, you might know someone who got laid off or you have a relative who lives it could be a neighbor, it could be a relative in another state, and so it doesn't take much of that to happen for it to affect people on a personal level. Either they've been laid off or they know someone who's been laid off, or they're out there looking for a job and really I have a bunch of friends who have been looking for work for months, and it's really hard right now. So I think that more than anything, more than any of the big data, I think that's why you have this pervasive feeling about this is not a great economy, despite the fact that, as you said, Matt, you look at some of the top line numbers, and top line numbers tend to result in headlines. So that when the headline for the stock market is, "Hey, the stock market hit a bunch of record highs this year," it's like that sounds great. But then you start to dig into it a little closer, you see that it's really just the 7 biggest companies that are carrying the market, and that there are 493 companies in the S&P 500 that are flat to negative.
I think that's real. That's exactly where I'd like to go because it feels to me people talk a lot about a K-shaped economy. I'm not even sure I know what that means. To me, it feels like the icebox of an economy. It's the old saw about I'm like the guy who has his head in the icebox, not a term people use anymore, so it's old. Head in the icebox and feet in the oven. And on average, I feel fine. And that's really what we're seeing. Housing is in a total rut. Farmers, we have to bail them out with $12 billion because they're getting clobbered by Trump's tariffs. Manufacturing has been shrinking for months. As you say, the hiring situation is terrible. It's really, really hard. And yet the overall US economy has been growing and the stock market has been on a historic upswing, and it's all because of the hyperscalers. It's Meta, it's Amazon, Google, or Microsoft, Oracle. They've spent more than 100 billion on AI infrastructure. That's the equivalent of 3 Manhattan projects in just the last 3 months. In 10 months, we're spending the equivalent of the entire moonshot program over the course of 10 months. And that is essentially what's powering the whole stock market and the whole economy. So I have to ask you, is the AI driven economy a bubble? Is AI going to pop?
Yes, it is a bubble, and yes, it is going to pop. Now, when does it pop? I can't tell you that, and I don't know that anyone else can either. That's the thing about bubbles. They all pop. They always pop. And so, I think there are some lessons to be drawn from, say, the last 25 years of the US economy that I think can give us a sense of what it's gonna look like or what it could look like when the AI bubble pops. So the first thing is, for those viewers who are old enough to remember the dot-com bubble popping in 2000, 2001,
I'm still
and
waiting for my pets.com delivery.
exactly. E-toys, all the classics. Here's the thing, though. Where I was gonna go with that was, okay, yes, the dot-com bubble burst, but also, it didn't mean every company went to 0. Shares of Amazon fell 90% when the dot-com bubble burst and continued to sort of drag on in 2001 and 2002. 90%, but it didn't go to 0, and the company rebuilt, and it's now one of the biggest companies on the planet. And there are other companies that survived the dot-com bubble and continue to thrive today. So it wasn't just Amazon. Amazon was not some unicorn that was the lone company to emerge from the dot-com bubble. And that's what happens when bubbles burst, that a lot of companies get hurt in a big way. A lot of companies go under and disappear, but not all of them. So I think that you mentioned Oracle. Shares of Oracle have fallen from their high. They haven't been cut in half or anything like that, but they're down about 20% from their high. And I think we're likely to see when the AI bubble bursts, we're likely to see that because what do companies do when there's a recession, when there's any kind of impact to the economy? First thing they do is they stop spending. They cut back on spending. And so that means cutting back on marketing, cutting back on investments. That's what happened when the dot-com bubble burst. I was at the Motley Fool at the time, and at the time, the business model of the company was advertising based because it was one of the Fool.com was one of the most popular websites when it came to investing. But what that meant was the major advertisers on the site kind of controlled the purse strings for the company. And most of the advertising money that the company was taking in was coming from half a dozen discount brokers. And so when the 6 biggest advertisers come to you and say, "Just see, in the next fiscal year, we're gonna cut our spend by 80%," guess what? You got problems. So all of those ripple effects happen. I think that's one part of the AI bubble. I think another lesson comes from the great financial crisis, and we can get into
Mm.
that if you want.
No, I'm happy to. I mean, I think that there's what you're saying. I just want to make a connection point really quick to you talk about ripple effects, and here's where they ripple into the real economy for real people. Our old friend MJ in the chat. I'm part of the layoff crew. It's brutal, and I have tons of experience in 2 degrees. I got to tell you, MJ, I'm sorry, and you are so far from not alone. You're not alone. You're not. As you said, Chris, a ton of people, if you're not affected, someone. And so this really is that like icebox oven situation where you've got this very small dynamo powering stock growth, right? And powering, I guess, enough investment that it's hitting our GDP and keeping it in the positive. But there are all these downward pressures going on. We had another comment here. That's a good one from the Cynthia Rice. And then Amethyst Peony pointing out, my youngest started working at CVS because his girlfriend's mom is the manager. I mean, that's really the position that people are in here. And I, not to be a total bummer, because I promised at the top of the show before you joined, Chris, that I was going to give people some points of light because the season is such a bummer. But what concerns me, and maybe this is where you're going with the connection to the Great Recession, but what concerns me is that from what I understand, importers have been running down their backlogs in the warehouse, and they're really reluctant to stock up again, but they've kind of run out of runway to avoid it. And so now they're going to get hit by the tariffs, and the cushioning they've been providing to price increases throughout the economy is going to go away. They can't possibly absorb it much longer. So in a way, I'm afraid that it may get worse before it gets better, but maybe you were going to go in a different direction with a different connection point.
No, I mean, I think it's a great point. I mean, the great financial crisis, I mean, there are a couple of threads you can pull there. One actually ties directly to tariffs. Um, and I think at some point you and I are gonna talk about the upcoming Supreme
Let's
Court ruling on tariffs. So, I'll save that part for then. But the other part really just has to do with just sort of like the way that things balance out. Because AI is AI, but it's all these companies are still run by humans. And so human beings have to make decisions. They can use AI to make more informed decisions, but everyone has to sort of use their best judgment to figure out like, all right, what are we going to stock up on? What are we going to do with prices? How are we going to keep our customers? And you see this all the time with something you and I have talked about before when it comes to investing, which is as we wind down to, I think we have what is today, the 15th, the 16th. So
16th.
we have so we have 15 more days of Warren Buffett being the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway. You and I have talked about this before. Warren Buffett's the quality he loves most in a company, the thing he loves to see the most in any company before he invests in it is pricing power. Does this business
Mm.
have the ability to raise prices methodically over time? Whether it's a consumer-facing business like CVS or Netflix, or it's more of a B2B, company like Oracle. Do they have the ability to raise prices? The thing about that is if you're gonna raise prices in your business, you have to be very smart in the way that you do it. You can't just jack up prices because you'll lose customers, and once you lose customers, it's harder to get them back. So I'm cautiously optimistic that I don't wanna say the worst is over 'cause I think it's a mistake to try and make those types of predictions, but I am cautiously optimistic that we are gonna see some balancing out in the economy in 2026 and the stock market. And what I mean by balancing out in the stock market is I think some of the stocks that really have not performed this year are going to start to get a little bit more sunshine and provide better results. Now, the trade-off is I think some of the big tech companies that have had great runs this year, and look, I'm a Google shareholder, so I'm very happy with how they've done. But, you'd be crazy to think that because shares of Google are up 50% this year, they're gonna be up 50% next year. That's not gonna happen.
That would seem to go against basic principles of math and common sense. This is just to MJ's point about the price pressures. If they don't in Washington fix the ACA tax credit subsidy issue, which Republicans, I did a deep dive in my "That's Bullshit" segment of the political rehab show that I release on Fridays. I did a full, what we used to call in wrestling, a 2-point takedown of Republicans' ACA alternative, which was absolutely craptacular. But it goes to the point that MJ is raising, is that there's a lot of crowding out that happens in people's personal financial picture. It's like maybe health insurance is getting crowded out. Maybe, as Fox News is suggesting, no presents for adults. Yeah, that's a real sunny optimist Reagan-esque economic strategy. It's like, see, you can make do with less. Give each other a warm, firm handshake. That's the real spirit of, yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Take that, Megyn Kelly, and your war on Christmas. You see this kind of ripple, and you also see it in kind of, I'm seeing more and more of these kind of like hidden costs They don't want to sticker shock people, businesses. And so it's the opposite of what Warren Buffett is talking about, where companies have some measure of control over the prices they set. I mentioned in response to your prompt that my big splurge was a new work laptop, which I still haven't had the time to get working. And Dell, I'm putting you on notice. Fuck you, because you sold me this laptop. And one of the things you sold is, oh, it'll be easy. By the way, I feel like shit because I bought a Dell, and then the Dells contributed to Donald Trump's bullshit like Trump accounts. So I'm pretty ticked off at Dell as a company right now. But one of the things they touted is, oh, it's so easy. You can transfer everything from your old Dell to your new Dell. And long story, and a lot of calls to customer support and some very intelligent, friendly people in India later, I discovered, oh yeah, we'll make that easy for you for a small $50 fee. We'll make it easy. Do you want this to be easy, or do you want it to suck for you? And I'm like, fuck you. I want it to suck. I'm not paying. So this is the kind of shit that is percolating through the economy. Let's talk tariffs. You invoked them before. There was an item in Politico this morning that the administration is beginning to realize that if the Supreme Court case on Trump's tariffs goes against them, A, it's going to be harder than they were banking on to try to reinstate them. And B, maybe they weren't whistling Dixie when they said in the oral arguments in that Supreme Court case that unwinding Trump's tariffs would be a logistical nightmare. And logistical nightmares and uncertainty tend to be bad for business and for the economy. Chris, what is going to happen? Is this going to be like, I want the Supreme Court to rule against Trump's tariffs because duh, but on the other hand, is this going to get incredibly messy?
I think it has the potential to be very, very messy. Yes, absolutely. So the debate up till this point has been theoretical. Really, the question of the way President Trump has been using tariffs, it's been this academic question that has been debated in the financial media and in academia. It's, does the President of the United States, any President of the United States, have the power to do this? That's the academic question. So you can have those debates have been had since April, since this all started. If the Supreme Court rules against the administration on this immediately goes from being something that is theoretical and academic to something that is 100% real. So companies, some of which are very large, will very quickly say, great, we would like our money back, please. They may have to sue the administration to do that. But yes, this is all my very long, with context answer to, could this get messy? Yeah, it could get incredibly messy. And I think that's part of where the economy gets even stranger. The headline for this episode is this the strangest economy ever? It's like,
is this the strangest economy ever?
I mean, it's probably on the short list, but I would say it becomes even stranger once the Supreme Court decides to rule against the administration, if in fact they do that. I am not a Supreme Court watcher. I'm not one. I don't read the tea leaves of the Supreme Court, but I remember when the oral arguments were going on and listening to some of the questions that were coming from some of the conservative justices. And I thought, boy, those are pretty skeptically framed questions coming from people like Brent Kavanaugh and John Roberts. And they have the same tone of the questions that were coming from Justice Kagan. So I just thought, boy, again, I'm not an expert. I don't read the tea leaves on this, but all of these justices seem to be pretty skeptical of the case that the administration is making for these tariffs. So, yeah, I think it gets very weird and very ugly quickly because companies are not going to hesitate to say, great, give us our money back.
Let's take a break. We'll be right back. I am trying to play the movie, which is one of the things I've talked about this on the show before. One of the things that I learned in public policy grad school is that the most useful exercise you can do with any policy is to play the movie, to try to figure out how would it realistically play out at a highly detailed practical level. And I'm trying to play the movie here. And look, you're the expert on the stock market and businesses and business strategy, but the amount of uncertainty that would reign. I mean, again, I'm rooting for the Supreme Court to do the right thing here, right? I don't want Trump's massive power grab, illegality, and the precedent, any of that to stick. But the amount of uncertainty that would ensue at that point as businesses tried to figure out, are we going to get our money back? Are they going to take another run at this? Is this going back to the Supreme Court? Are we getting a portion of our money back? How will this work? What do I do about the warehouse restocking that I need to accomplish in the meantime? What if my supply chain has already gotten disrupted because I was in search of one of these Chinese workarounds where you go through a third country, which is something that has been happening? The chaos that we've already seen, which is playing out through the economy, could get amped up, which is another reason why I don't want to be a stone cold bummer about this, but it really could get worse before it gets better, and it would be all of Trump's making. What?
Let me just add one thing,
I was
though,
about to
since
get bright and sunny, so
no, let me just let me add
down, please.
a little bit of sunshine or potential sunshine, which is we were talking before about the balancing act that every business has to go through in terms of how much are we charging our customers? What are we doing to retain our customers? Um, Here's the prediction I'm going to make. If the Supreme Court rules against the administration and companies start to get their money back, whether they get it back immediately or they have to sue to get it back, here's my prediction. There's going to be some number of companies that view this as a significant opportunity to create a stronger bond with their customers.
Interesting.
I think smart companies are going to, if they start getting money, tariff money back from the administration, I mean, think about businesses like Walmart, among others, that when they had to start raising prices, they let their customers know with a little note at the bottom of some of the items they were selling to say, just see, this is higher because of tariffs. The $1 increase in this item is because of tariffs. I think smart companies will do the opposite of that. If the Supreme Court rules against the administration, they start getting money back. They start going to their customers saying, just see, we're having a tariff sale. We're lowering prices. The things that we had to raise prices on, we're lowering those prices. And we
That's
want you to come
fascinating.
back.
No, it's really interesting. I was just my long-suffering wife who has to endure some of my frustrated rants. I still want to write my book. Everything is a
Okay.
pain in the ass. It's me pointing out. I have a whole taxonomy of my PETA principle, not Peter, PETA, the PETA principle. It's that businesses strategically deploy the power of being a pain in the ass to get what they want. Republicans strategically deploy the power of being a pain in the ass. That's what the whole like work requirement thing is, right? It's a way to, like, that was their whole workaround on food stamps. It's a way to make things a pain in the ass, to put more sand in the gears, to incentivize the kinds of behavior you want without looking like so much of a bad guy. And companies are doing this. This is why Dell snuck in that $50, right? They don't want to put it up front. They're just going to make it such a pain in the ass that they're going to extort the money out of you. To your argument, to your point, I really wonder if there's going to be a little bit of a reversal, and it will be a good business strategy to differentiate yourself in a tough marketplace by being easy to work with, transparent on prices, and to not get relegated, if you're seeking customer service, to some AI bot netherworld. Or, as much as I appreciate the friendly and intelligent people I'm rerouted to on the other side of the earth, like, I would like to get someone who's actually empowered to do something about my problem, which these folks frequently are not. I really, really wonder if that's going to be a business strategy. Speaking of business strategy, let's go to the fun side. I mean, this is more like fun and entertaining, although I think there's some negatives to the story as well. I want to talk about the world's least attractive menage a trois: Warner, Netflix, Paramount. So you are long time. You used to appear bi-weekly when I hosted a radio show, and you'd give us the money angle back when you were a Motley Fool guy. By the way, Microsoft defaulted to putting the umlaut over the O in Motley. I shit you not.
Really?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
it's really awesome. So you used to appear, and we used to love to talk about media firms, media mergers. Boy, this is a buffet. This is a what did Robert Bork call it? A feast for the intellect. Go, Chris Hill, go. What would you like to say about this cluster?
I'm fascinated to see how it's all gonna play out. Who is actually going to win, Warner Brothers? I'm a little surprised. I mean, I think it speaks to the consolidation in Hollywood over the last 30 years that, 2 companies are essentially fighting over Warner Brothers. I'm not saying that Warner Brothers doesn't have its assets, it does, but you would think this was the greatest, content creator of the last century, and it's one of them, but I'm just a little surprised. I think it's just sort of the fact that Warner Brothers as a business on its own has struggled for a long time, and there is value to be had in the content, in the movie library in particular, TV to a lesser extent, and some of the intellectual properties. But, so I'm a little amused at sort of the fighting over it because it's like, "All right, I guess it's the last big asset for a media company to take over." But I'm trying to be optimistic, in the wake of some of the hand-wringing that is going on in the creative community, and we started this conversation talking about AI. I mean, Disney is not involved in the bidding for Warner Brothers, but Disney didn't help matters when they came out and talked about, they're gonna start using AI to license content creation and that sort of thing. So I under and I think where that comes into play with the Paramount Warner Brothers Netflix story is that people, and I'm not saying they're wrong, but there are some people who say if you put all of this content and all of this ability, all of this gatekeeping in the hands of one company, whether it's Paramount or Netflix, you're just gonna end up with a lot of garbage. You're gonna end
That's
up with, like, tentpole movies, Fast and the Furious 19, and however many Marvel
God.
movies that Disney wants to make and that sort of thing, and there's gonna be no, like, quality content, and, to that, I would just say good content always wins, and
All right.
good content, like nature, to paraphrase Jeff Goldblum, good content finds a way.
Finds a way.
Good
All right.
content
Well,
finds an audience.
then I have two questions for you. First, should we do the remainder of this conversation like we're the Christian Bale version of Batman? Who's going to be the winner of this? You can let that rest. You don't have to actually answer that. That was mostly
That's good
rhetorical.
because 'cause I'm not gonna do that, so go on. What was your second thing?
You were going to suggest Bane instead. Okay. Second, if you are a normal human like Jim Williams, who I assume is a normal human, although maybe he's a superhero. He writes, your streaming services and other media platform rates are going to skyrocket. So the concerns that people have raised from a consumer standpoint are movie theaters are going to go extinct. Another concern is gyms, that everything you pay will be through the nose and other places. And then the third concern is it's all going to get Netflix-icized. Like the content, which is a word I fucking hate, that the content is going to become more slopified because Netflix has forged entry into whole new genres of entertainment, including entertainment meant to be consumed while you're not paying attention and you're folding laundry, and they re-explain exposition over and over again. It's like, just in case your mind has wandered for the last 5 minutes. That kind of crap. A lot more reality TV, a lot more Desperate Housewives. So, from a consumer standpoint, if you are just a someone who likes streaming, someone
Yeah,
who
and I
likes
am.
movies, what are you rooting for here?
Um, I I I'm not really rooting for either Netflix or Paramount.
Oh no.
I'm sort of agnostic as to who wins that battle. If the question is, who
Okay.
am I rooting for in terms of Warner Brothers? We talked earlier about businesses and pricing. I think streaming services have to be unbelievably careful about their pricing strategy. And I think we're going to see more experimentation with it. I think we're gonna see more, so in the same way that Netflix started making content for second screen people, people who are watching something while they're looking at their phone. Which, by the way, I will argue that one of the reasons the most popular programming, and it has been for years,
Oh,
one of the
no.
reasons the most popular programming in America
Oh, gosh.
has been and will continue to be the NFL is because the NFL is a second screen sport. It's
But
not hockey, it's not soccer,
isn't it
it's
baseball? Isn't it really baseball? Because you don't,
no.
one would argue, one doesn't have to look up at baseball hardly at all.
W Once they instituted the pitch clock, have you been to a baseball game with the pitch clock?
Oh gosh, like,
You actually have to pay attention now. You
well, that's
actually have to, yeah.
improving baseball is good, but yes.
So
But
so in the
it's the kind of thing you can put on in the background and
Right. So in the
yeah.
same way that Netflix is doing that, they're saying, "We're gonna create some programming for people because we know there are people who are so lit and we can do it inexpensively," that kind of thing. I think Netflix and other streaming companies are going to do the same because Netflix started they didn't come up with that idea 15 years ago. They came up with that idea based on data. And I think streaming companies are going to start seeing data that suggests to them, what we need to start doing? We need to start making smarter offerings for people who are just going to be watching us on a monthly basis, where the new season of Slow Horses is out and the whole show is out, so therefore I'm going to subscribe to Apple Plus TV for 1 month so I can watch the whole run of Slow Horses. I had stopped subscribing to HBO Max, and I just saw an ad on YouTube that season 2 of The Pit is coming in January, and I thought to myself, "All right, I'm gonna figure out when I can find a time to just binge that, and I'll sign up for that." I do think that companies are gonna have to be smart about that because, and I think I mentioned this to you in an email, in the same way that vinyl records have been having a little bit of a comeback,
Mhm.
where younger people are buying record players and they're going to record stores and buying vinyl records. This past month, for the first time in years, cable subscriptions in America went up. We've been hearing about cord cutting for over a
What?
decade.
What?
Cable subscriptions went up. They went up a little bit. It wasn't much,
That's
but
crazy.
they after years of just steadily going down, they started to tick up, and I believe the reason is in response to the streaming services, where people are saying, "What? If I need to," because it doesn't take much to run the numbers. You don't need an advanced degree in applied calculus to figure out what does it cost to subscribe to Netflix and Apple Plus and HBO Max and YouTube TV, and then take that number and say, "All right, what is Comcast gonna cost me per month if I get X, Y, and Z? What can I get included in that?" I mean, that is, to me, one of the benefits of being a consumer of streaming services. The math is easy. There's not really hidden costs in the same way that Dell
That is
Computer
true.
is trying to get you to, and by the way, that is totally a difference between you and me. We started this whole conversation talking about splurges. I am such a Luddite that anything I do with technology, buying a new television, buying a new laptop, whatever it is, I'm like, how much money do I have to pay you for you to make this painless for me and to
Oh,
make it work the way I want?
my problem
$100,
is,
$200? Fine. That is money spent in my book.
what my problem is that I adored my father-in-law, who is such a role model for me, and he like me, he grew up in New York City, not like fixing anything, doing a lot of services, and he taught himself. And after I met him, he gave me the confidence, perhaps misplaced, to believe that I too could fix anything if I just applied my brain to it, which is not true. But I convinced myself of it. And now, whenever I pull it off, I feel amazing. And when I don't, I'm like, oh, challenge accepted. And so, yeah. Look, I know we're kind of rounding the bend. I want to do a couple of things before I lose you because you're a very busy man with a very popular podcast. First of all, just want to acknowledge I love people jumping in on the chats with their viewing habits. Some people don't do any paid TV. Some people are more into gaming. Some people don't check their phone while watching streaming TV. They do if they're watching commercial TV. My question to you, Barbara, is what about my daughter? We like to watch Survivor together. Is that streaming or commercial TV? Because she likes to sneak onto her phone. I'm like, no, one screen at a time. Get back to me on that one. And of course, even though this is kind of a random contribution in the chats, I will go ahead and acknowledge from Ahmed Ali. Yes, I do like Somali people. I've met quite a number and they've been universally delightful. So that's neither here nor there. Look, I think if there's a leitmotif that comes through everything you're saying, it's that maybe there's going to be a little bit of a flow back in a positive direction. See, I'm going to force this 1,000 points of light, 8 points of light theme back on you. Yeah, Barbara, you're right. It's commercial TV, but they put it on Paramount Plus too these days. So I don't know. I don't even know anymore. I think what you're saying is, yes, tariffs are going to be messy. If they unwind the tariffs, it's going to be messy, but
Absolutely.
maybe it's going to force a new business strategy. I think you're saying that maybe this whole mega merger, however it turns out, sure, it could lead to some more like rough pricing and more slop, but it could also lead to some innovation and some better products for consumers that we might want in our streaming lives. I don't know. I'm not sure that I have a good news silver lining, but I'd like to impose one about this entire weird economy. I guess you did say that the rest of the stock market might start to recover and round into shape. So overall, final question, I'll get you out of here. Are you feeling overall optimistic about all things business related and economic this holiday season, or the opposite?
I'm feeling cautiously optimistic because, and I realize how this is going to sound, but we've been through rough times before. Like we just have, and in our adult lifetimes, Matt, like we've been through really, like the great financial crisis, 2008, 2009, 2010. That was a really rough time. So was the dot-com bubble bursting. So was COVID. March of 2020, the stock market fell 28% in a month, 30%. So we've seen all of this before. I mean, a question I used to ask analysts at the Motley Fool, when sometimes I would do this on the podcast, sometimes I would just do this around the office, when anytime anyone would make some declarative statement about any business in any industry, that would, and the declarative statement would come under the umbrella of sort of like, this company has won. The fight's over. This company has won. And I would sometimes say, yeah, what do you think their competition, what do you think their competitors are going to do? You think they're just going to fold up their shop and go home? You think they're just going to do nothing? I mean, I remember talking with analysts in the mid 2010s about Walmart and when Amazon was just really taking off, and Amazon bought Jet.com, which was an online, it was an e-commerce platform. Walmart bought Jet.com for $3 billion. And there were analysts who were like, why are they doing this? Amazon has won. It's over. And I'm like, what? It's Walmart. But you think they're just gonna like go home and do nothing? They're not gonna try. And to my detriment, I've never been a Walmart shareholder. And that is to my financial detriment because that is an amazing business. And if you're a shareholder of that company, it pays dividends literally and figuratively. So I think I feel like America, us as individuals, and us as communities, as states, we're resilient, and it's gonna be bumpy. It's absolutely gonna be messy if the Supreme Court tells the administration you have to unwind these tariffs, but we'll get there. We'll figure it out.
That is a wonderfully upbeat note to end on. I want to acknowledge there's been a really vibrant conversation going on here about Cynthia Rice's point about the fact that reality TV is how we got Trump. It's mindless garbage, and people have really been responding to that. So more streaming slop reality TV, maybe not a good thing. How you can avoid it? Spend your eyeball time on good, intelligent live streams with people like Chris Hill and me. That's as you're doing, and we really appreciate it. We really, I really do. I know it may have come off as a little disingenuous when I said that was my 8th point of light, but it really truly is. And I want to thank Chris Hill for being here. If you're getting into the streaming world, if you're interested, I just shared in the chat, you can have this link to use StreamYard like I do to do your live streaming. It's super useful. It really is. I'm not getting paid to endorse this. It's just a good tool. I do want to make a little bit of a housekeeping announcement that I'm not going to be here next Tuesday because got a call from our friend Cliff Schechter yesterday saying, I've got a guest that I really, really want to go on the live stream with, and they can only do it in the Tuesday slot. And I said, hey, man, it's all good. So Cliff Schechter will be here 2:00 next week. I may or may not take the Christmas Eve Wednesday live stream from Cliff in exchange. I haven't decided. I haven't looked at my calendar yet at what's going on for Christmas Eve. But look, in case I don't see you before Christmas, even though it's not my jam, have a wonderful one. Have a merry one. Have a good one. I know there's a lot of tough stuff going on out there, but you're not alone if you're going through some tough stuff. And we've all got your back, and I appreciate you. And so, in the meantime, whenever I see you next, stay safe. I'll see you soon.